Hey everyone, my name is Shanice and welcome back to my channel. Hi, I know it's been quite a while since my last video. I'm trying to get back into my level of consistency with weekly videos in 2023. I don't know how that's gonna go, but I'm starting with a more positive attitude. 2022 didn't end all that great. I just wasn't in the best reading mood, and then 2023 has started kind of rough too. I tested positive for COVID and, I'm recovering and everything, but still don't feel 100% back to normal. But this is one of my favorite times on BookTube. I love watching people's yearly wrap-ups, seeing what their favorite books are, seeing what their least favorite books are for the previous reading year. So I figured this would be a fun video to start the year off with. So of the 84 books that I managed to read last year, I have narrowed this list down to 10 of my favorite books. I have 5 honorable mentions that technically should be part of the, annual favorite list, but my rule is that I'm not going to count books within the official numbered list that I had already read that were, rereads for the year. Though they're not officially on the list, I still want to mention them because they're very valuable to me in 2022 and really made my reading so much better, so much more enjoyable, and they're very much quintessential parts of my 2022 reading year. And without further ado, I am just going to quickly go over the 5 books on my honorable mentions list. First is really a series, but I'm going to have this one book kind of stand in for the entire series. And that book is Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. I reread the entire series at the beginning of last year. Had a blast. I love rereading these books so much. Harry Potter is definitely just a part of my childhood, a part of my life. It just puts me in the holiday spirit, takes me back to a world that I know and that I love. And yeah, I had a blast reading the 7th book in particular. I just think that the way that the last book ties up all the loose ends is just pretty remarkable. How everything just comes together, just for me was very satisfying. There are some, parts that I wish were a little better, but still can't deny that this was just a fantastic closure to my favorite series ever. Another reread that I treasured so much this past year was Normal People by Sally Rooney. There's another Sally Rooney book on the official list, and pretty much 2022 was the year that I gave her another chance and dove right in and fell in love with her characters, the intimacy that she captures in her stories. Normal People is no exception. I just thought it was phenomenal, but again, it was a reread for me, so it's not officially on the list. Another honorable mention is My Year of Rest and Relaxation by Ottessa Moshfegh. Really glad I gave this another chance to, kind of like Sally Rooney. The first time I read it, wasn't so fond of it, didn't hate it, but kind of didn't see why anybody was making such a big deal about it, but gave it another chance, and yeah, I get it. I think maybe because I was at a point in my life where things were not going so great, you sort of overly sympathize with the main character's negative state of mind, not to her levels, not to her extremes, hopefully, but yeah, just you like her acerbic nature, her kind of pessimistic, misanthropic mood. It's funny. It's also very astute in its observations and commentary about life. And yeah, I think, Ottessa Moshfegh just has a very specific style. It's not going to be for everyone, but it definitely worked for me, and I loved this book, and I think this is my favorite Ottessa Moshfegh. Another book on my honorable mentions that was a reread was Don Quixote. Loved this. I guess half of it is technically a reread, half of it is technically not. But, I'm just going to consider it a reread just because I didn't want to clutter the official numbered list. But this is one of those classics that everyone really should read. I know it's ancient, basically. People might, be a little hesitant to pick it up because it is quite an old book, and it's so chunky and, yeah, dense, like I said. Very small print, at least in my edition, but It is so funny. It is so good, and beyond its funniness, its humor, it's just kind of a touching, emotional story about an older man who just wants to find purpose in his life, and he wants to, you know, basically live his life as if he was a knight errant, and he wants to live adventures and meet new people on the road. And sure, maybe a little unhealthy the way he goes about it, but you just sort of, by the end of the book, beyond just making fun of him and thinking that he's silly and what he's doing, you feel for him and you sort of see the existential crisis that he's having and how we all kind of go through that in our own ways. So it was just a really beautiful book, very funny, very metafictional if you like that kind of stuff. So I highly recommend this one. The last book on my honorable mentions list is My Brilliant Friend by Elena Ferrante. This was translated from Italian by Anne Goldstein, and my version of Don Quixote was translated by Edith Grossman from the Spanish. So yeah, this is another example of why I love rereading and why I think giving some books a second chance is crucial. Similar to my Year of Rest and Relaxation, I had read this a first time like 2 years ago or so, and I didn't hate it. I thought there was a lot of potential here, but I didn't get what was so fantastic about it. But I was just in the mood to reread the entire series. I'm currently on book 2, going slowly, but at a comfortable pace for my life now. But yeah, with My Brilliant Friend, I just think that Ferrante is unmatched in capturing an internal life and capturing the jealousies that we feel towards other people and the uncomfortable cruelties that we might wish upon others that are close to us that we love, and just the conflicting nature of human beings. There's a lot here that some people may not agree with. They might question, like, why are these two young girls even friends? They clearly don't like each other. I think it's really, really honest about how jealousy works, like I mentioned, about how obsession festers. I really had a blast rereading this. This was my bus read for a week. And it just brought some sanity back into my life. I can't wait to just keep reading this and hopefully fall in love with the rest of the series even more. Alright, so starting off with number 10 on my official favorite books of 2022, I have Autumn by Karl Ove Knausgård, and it was translated from the Norwegian by Ingvild Berkey. This is just a series of meditations on random things that Knausgård is happening upon. He looked out his window. This was kind of his writing exercise, and whatever his eyes fell upon, he sort of started writing about it. And the whole premise is that he's observing the world and jotting down these observations to then pass on to his, at this point, unborn daughter. So he has little chapters on beekeeping, he has ones on blood, he has ones on fever, just anything. He's trying to basically transcribe the world around him in minute detail so it makes sense to his daughter when she's born and she's growing up, as almost like a helpful guide to her in understanding her surroundings, because life can be very indecipherable even for the best of us. And so through this, it's just very philosophical, thought-provoking. It's slow and quiet, so I wouldn't read this if you want like a plot-driven book. Definitely no plot. I mean, it's just, like I said, observations, meditations. If you want a book that's just gonna make you stop and think and put the book down, then this is definitely for you. It definitely helped me. It inspired me. It just made me want to go out and learn and be more curious and ask more questions and just take my time understanding things. So highly recommend this one. I loved it. Definitely one of my favorites of the year. At number 9, I have Boy Parts by Eliza Clark. Was not expecting to love this at all, to be honest. Another bus read for me. I had a terrible week at work, like all weeks at my work, and this was, it was Friday. I was just done with work. I wanted to go home already, and I just started reading this on the bus home. And, I have about an hour long bus ride home, so I have a lot of time to read on there, and I just couldn't put it down. And I went home, and I also continued. I couldn't put it down. It was exactly what I needed. It's fast paced. Again, it's one of these like darkly humorous kinds of books. The narrator is essentially depressed. There's a lot of cruelty in her narration. I guess I like those kinds of characters and these types of points of view. I don't know what that says about me, but I really enjoyed this. It's very funny, it's very shocking, it's good for the October spooky season. It's not like flat out horror. I think it's more like a social commentary on class and gender and sexuality and consent, and it does ask some uncomfortable questions about art and its ethical role. I highly recommend the audiobook too. I got mine from Audible. I liked that the narration itself, the main character, what is her name? Irina. I believe she's from Newcastle in the story, and so they actually had a narrator, a voice actor who had a Newcastle accent. And that plays a big part of the story. I mentioned it does talk about class, so it's important here, and I'm glad that they kept that for the audible narration. So highly recommend that one. Highly recommend this book. It was excellent. Glad I picked it up in 2022. Next up at number 8, I have one of the shortest books that I read. One of the most surprising additions to this list and to my reading year. I just was blown away by this. I gave this a 5 stars, I believe. And this one is called Nowhere to Be Found. It's by Bae Sua. It was written in Korean and translated to English by Sora Kim Russell. I read this in one sitting. Oh my gosh, if you love linguistic play, if again you like characters who are sort of depressed, don't know what they're doing with their lives, hate their jobs, feel hopeless, this is for you. This is a very conceptual novel, has a lot of themes being spoken of. It is a little bit surrealist, like it says in the back, for the main character, time and identity blur, and all action is reaction. We have a character here who just doesn't get why other people are so passionate and motivated about life when for her it hasn't been that way. Hope is kind of the thing that kills you. She can't avoid noticing the unfairness of life, and why other people succeed for trying the same amount that she's trying, but she doesn't succeed in the same way. Just all the things that I'm pretty sure affect each and every one of us. So reading this was, very revealing, and yes, I felt seen in some ways by this, but it didn't make me sad. It actually it made me feel less alone. And it's funny, again, in a darkly humorous kind of way. I was really blown away by this because I didn't really like Bae Sua's Until Night and Day, which I read, I want to say in 2020. I think it was 2020. And so everything positive that I had heard about this is actually how I would describe this book. So I don't know, maybe if you liked that one, you will also like this one, or maybe you're like me and you didn't like the first one, but you will like this one. Next, at number 7, I have a celebrity memoir. Never thought I would include this on my list at all. Another surprise. I don't know, 2022 was just the year of reading surprises. This is Viola Davis's Finding Me. This is a hero's tale, basically. I mean, Viola goes through all the childhood traumas that she endured, the poverty that she lived in, her family life, the sicknesses of her parents, in terms of health, in terms of some addictions that they had, the crushing weight of poverty and how it never lets go, even if you technically escape its physical grasp. It still has its hold on you, and has its remnants with you for the rest of your life. It's hard to escape, and she just details and chronicles all of that so well. She's very honest about the artist's life. I feel like often it's glamorized and the struggle is actually not portrayed as a struggle at all. It just seems like, a few days of a hard life and then they had success. But this really shows you what an artist's struggle looks like, especially for a woman of color, especially for a darker skinned woman of color. This book made me laugh, this book made me cry, and just respect Viola Davis even more than I already did. And even Meryl Streep and George Clooney get shout outs in here. So kudos to them. But yeah, loved this book. It was a privilege reading this. And then I have my short story collection of the year, the best of the best in my opinion, and that's Shirley Jackson's The Lottery and Other Stories. This is a weird bind up of The Haunting of Hill House, We Have Always Lived in the Castle, and The Lottery and Other Stories. What can I say about Shirley Jackson? The master of the short story. Definitely one of my favorite short story writers ever. If you are anxious, if you like reading about anxiety, if you just like narration that is crisp and understanding and sympathetic to people who may be a little bit different, who, you know, are a little bit scared of social situations, or a little bit quieter, more introverted, don't like to speak that often, they're more listeners than speakers, thinkers more than talkers. Her books, her stories surround these types of people, and I think you will love her. She pulls the rug out from under you in some of these stories. Characters are behaving one way, you're on their side, and then all of a sudden she just takes you back a little bit and you realize their real intentions and how not so nice or not so good and innocent those same people that we were rooting for are. I would recommend, if you want just a little added atmospheric read, to go ahead and read this in October. They're not necessarily horror stories, but they are psychologically thrilling. They're a little creepy and haunting, and, you know, people do odd things in her stories. She's just phenomenal, and again, the best short story collection that I read all year, and cannot wait to continue my reading journey of Shirley Jackson. And from the master of the short story to the master of one of the longest books I've ever read, one of the longest books ever written, that's Victor Hugo with Les Miserables. And this was a new translation from the French to English by Julie Rose. Can't really compare this translation to anything else because this is the only translation that I've read. But it is gorgeous. It is stunning. I mean, again, if you love linguistic play and just beautiful, flowery, philosophical, emotional, deep language, you will love this kind of narrative style. This is a sweeping and very heavily moralistic type of story. It goes into every detail imaginable about history, about each character, history of towns, history of peoples, history of wars, history of a country, history of the sewage system in Paris. This is basically a historical document, aside from just a masterful piece of fiction. You will experience all the emotions when you're reading this. At times, because of the language, because of the story, the sweeping nature of it all, you will hate it and want to throw it out the window, like I did several times, just because of how bogged down it is in detail. But just continue. I promise by the end you'll realize why it all had to be this way, how everything ties together. It really blew me away. One of my favorite books of all time now. Did make me cry at the end. I just felt so connected to these characters, and it really does say something that after I finished this, I kind of wanted to reread it immediately again. It's an act of discipline, but you'll come out of it a better person. Number 4, and this is actually just a standalone short story by another master writer, Toni Morrison. And this short story is, I think, pronounced recitative. This edition comes with an introduction by Zadie Smith, which is just as long as the short story itself. And if you have not read this, please, please, please read the short story first and then go to the introduction. That's the way that I did it. It turned out to be just the best decision I think I made in 2022. It challenges your notions of race and kind of confronts you as a reader, and you really notice just how much you rely on stereotypes to draw out characters, even if you think you're not. There's just a lot of experiment going on here. Don't dismiss it initially as just a basic short story. Take your time with it, then read the introduction. You will thank me later. At number 3, we have Translating Myself and Others by Jhumpa Lahiri. This was partially written in English, partially written in Italian, and therefore translated into English if it was in Italian by Jhumpa herself. These are essays about translation, about Jhumpa's experience learning Italian and falling in love with Italian literature and Italian language, and then becoming her own translator, or also the translator of other Italian writers. If you speak many languages, if you love learning languages like me, if you're someone who has experienced language anxiety of, being part of a culture, sort of speaking the language of that culture by birth, but not feeling totally confident in it, if you know that experience, if you know the experience of struggling with a language, you will find something here to just sympathize with, empathize with, connect to, like I did. I'm currently reading Unaccustomed Earth by Jhumpa Lahiri. She's one of my favorite writers ever. I adore her, and this was hands down one of my top nonfictions of 2022. And at number 2, we have my favorite fiction book of 2022, What a Shock, as I feel like most of the books on this list were to me. Really was not expecting to like this, and then I gave it 5 stars. This is Conversations with Friends by Sally Rooney. There's a lot, unfortunately, that I related to here, and I just felt seen and gripped by every single word on every page. It just kind of made me jealous. I wish I could write like Sally Rooney, but it also inspired me to spend more time with my own fiction. I will be here waiting and reading everything that Sally Rooney writes from now on. Loved this. I kind of want to reread it right now. So, yeah, Conversations with Friends, my favorite fiction of 2022. My favorite book of last year was a nonfiction book. It's one that I will treasure forever. I actually got my mom to read it as well, and she loved it too. And yeah, this is called The Warmth of Other Suns by Isabel Wilkerson. This tells the epic story of America's Great Migration, which basically was the migration of Black Americans from the South to the North in the United States in the mid 20th century. Isabel Wilkerson just has a very novelistic nonfiction style, and here she captures this great scope of the migration within 3 individual stories, real stories. These are real people that she follows. She collected thousands of interviews, and just the wealth of information that she had, that she condensed to, still like almost 600-page nonfiction, but you can just imagine like all the information she couldn't include in here. She does a good job of picking people from different states to show the way racism worked in different states in the South, and also those same people moving to different states in the North and seeing how racism still prevailed. If you think you're horrified already by slavery, you really don't know enough. Basically, reading this, I realized I didn't know enough. There's just a wealth of information here. You learn so much, you grow as a person, and you just, again, have the privilege of going on this journey with 3 incredible, brave people. Even if you don't normally read nonfiction, you will like this because, like I said, Wilkerson just has a very novelistic writing style, and she helps you along the way understanding these bigger concepts with the smaller individual stories. So just an amazing, amazing book. My favorite and one of my favorites of all time. And that is it. I'm losing my voice. I had to take a little break to have a coughing fit. Still, like I said, not 100% better, but on the road there. So thank you so much for watching. Let's hope that I just get back on track of my reading and can continue making steady videos every week. Like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you all next time. Bye.